Good afternoon, Opportunity Finance Network. We've made it. We are at the final session. So keep eating. We've got a treat for you. We named this session after our theme. We named it Lending Where It Counts, the Fight Ahead, because we realized that this space that we've created since Sunday has been the most special space. It's been where we come together and feel fueled and reinvigorated by the real souls that we do this work, the partners, the investors, and all of the CDFI practitioners and our clients. So this has been a special space, and we are all overwhelmed with the joy of this event, but give yourselves a hand. We've had an amazing journey. But we do have tough work ahead, and as something I always share with my friend Bill Bynum, it is to say, let's get it done. Let's get this fight on. Let's finish what we came here to do. So we wanted to inspire you all in whatever fight awaits you. And my kids accuse me. They say, Mom, you're not actually a real fighter kind of person. But I do use the analogy a lot because I do feel there's hard work ahead. So I made some phone calls, and I called 3 of my favorite fighters. And wanted to introduce you to Noel and to Robin and to Martin, and I'll be doing that one by one. But what I asked each of them to help us close with today in the fight ahead is I asked them to say 3 things. I asked them to say, why? What motivates you to do the work you do? Then I asked, when was it? Say a little bit about why you determined that CDFIs were the right part of the strategy. And then finally, I asked them to say something about what do we all need to do to be successful in the fight ahead. So what motivates you? When did you figure out that CDFIs were important? And what do we need to do to be successful in the fight ahead? So I don't know if they'll respect those 3 questions, but those are the ones I asked. And of course, we have tight timing on all of this, which I know they will break, so forget about giving the cues. But I want to start with asking Noel, Poyo. Many of you know Noel, some of you don't, so let me spend a minute on who we are fortunate to hear from. So Noel Andreas Poyo serves as the National Association of Latino Community Asset Builders Executive Director. He's also CEO of NALCAB, we all have our acronyms, subsidiary asset management company, which is called Escalera Community Investments. Noel has had a 20-year career focused on integrating how low-income people and immigrants can be integrated into mainstream financial services and real estate sector. As executive director of NALCAB, he's raised more than $300 million in private and federal investments for socially motivated real estate and economic development projects. And he joins me on many important councils in this industry. He advised the Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen and the Board of Governors as one of the 15 members of the Fed's Community Advisory Council. He is a graduate of Yale. We'll forgive him for that. He is bicultural and bilingual. He's a proud husband and father. But let me also tell you a personal note about Noel. He has a hunger to see Latino Americans in this country thrive. And I know he called me just seriously when I took this job. And he said, we have real work to do, Lisa, and it's not over. We have some new CDFIs to start. We have some power to share, and we have some money to raise. And those are music to my ears. And so with that, I ask you to just welcome Noel Poyo to the podium. Thank you. Thank you, Noel.
Good afternoon. You sound like you've been at a conference for 3 days. Good afternoon. There you are. There you are. All right, my name is Noel Poyo. I'm Executive Director of NALCAB. For those of you who don't know NALCAB, we're the hub of a national network of more than 120 organizations, mission-driven groups around the country in 40 states and DC. Our members build affordable housing, they address gentrification, they invest in small businesses, they strengthen family financial capability. We are based in San Antonio, Texas. We've got offices here in DC, and we've got more than 35 CDFIs in our membership, a lot of community development corporations, many immigrant rights groups, and a wide range of other community-based institutions that anchor our nation's Latino communities. So, NALCAB, our mission is to strengthen the economy by advancing economic mobility in Latino communities. So implicit in that mission statement is a macroeconomic perspective. It goes like this: the future strength and competitiveness of our country, of our economy, relies on far greater financial inclusion of people who today do not experience that inclusion, right? And so in this room, you know the data, whether we're talking about Latinos or African Americans or big portions of our Asian Pacific American communities or working class white communities, there is a large and growing number of people who are marginalized to one extent or another in our financial services sector and in our broader economy. So in our social media at NALCAB, we like to communicate about this with our hashtag Latino Economic Engine. We hope you'll use it, but this is not a Latino thing, this is not an African American thing, this is an us thing, right? We're all in this together. And we know this, right? So San Antonio as a city embodies this reality. It's a working class town. I love San Antonio, man. Watch out there. It's 65% or more Latino. It has a proud heritage of African American leadership, which is in part why we've got the largest MLK march in the country. We claim it, we got it. We're at the center of a very rural ranching region, an oil producing region. We're a highly segregated city. There are enormous distances between rich and poor in our city, both literally and figuratively. And our mayor, Ron Nuremberg, and our council have been pursuing an equity agenda. It is no accident this is the first time we've ever had a council that is equally balanced between men and women, right? And so we get an equity agenda. And they are trying to define a path forward for the city. They're trying to define what is an American city. And in this nation, we are trying to define what is an American. And sadly, as you know, for far too many, that definition is wrought and rooted in negative concepts of race and ethnicity and language, rather than our joint commitment to this thing we call the United States of America, right? I think of my family's story. My father's family came from Cuba to the United States, to Key West, in the 1860s. The Spanish didn't like him, they kicked him out. And so then the Spanish left and our family went back to Cuba. And then we came back to the United States after economic crisis and death in our family in the 1940s. And then they went to South America. And so my father came to this country when he was 18 from Argentina, right? I grew up in Buenos Aires, I grew up in Havana, I grew up in Miami, I grew up in San Antonio. I grew up on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, Texas. What does that make me? And so we are in a struggle for identity as individuals and as a nation. And cast a different way, perhaps a deeper way, this is about who we claim as our own. Especially across lines of difference. I believe my faith calls me to claim you as my sister and as my brother. But I will confess that these last 3 years have shown me some of the limits of my own faith. I cannot claim you if you're invested in the destruction of my culture and my language. I cannot claim you if you care less about justice for my nieces and my nephew because of their darker skin. I can't. And so I know that I'm supposed to love and forgive, but being at the center of a Latino-serving network for the past 3 years, I've seen too much, I've heard too much. God forgive me, I have my limits, right? And so I honestly believe that we need to be prepared to challenge the limits of our faith with the ferocity and fanaticism that we bring to this battle that we are in for the soul of our country, for the health of our economy, right? And I worry that we will see conflict in the streets of this nation like we have not seen in many years. Look at what's going on in Hong Kong. Look at what's going on in other places in the world, right? People have their limits, but we're not there yet. And until then, I have chosen capital as my tool, as my shield. And that's how I want to address the needs in my community and the investment that my people represent, right? And so just as our nation struggles with its identity, I think the CDFI movement is in that struggle. However, in stark contrast to our nation, we have leadership, right? And I can think of no one better than Lisa Mensah to walk us through this evolution. Lisa, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for picking us. You know, I want to say a word just about our future. You know, the future of this industry, I think equity is at the center of it. And I'm actually talking about balance sheet equity here, to be clear, right? You know, who has a strong equity position in the field and who does not is a map of equity. And now I mean the equity that you thought I meant before, right? I'm not trying to be glib, I'm not trying to be cute, but you know, equity is the pathway for us to make a more equitable industry, more equitable communities. We've got to start there. You know, JP Morgan Chase recognized this with the Pro Neighborhoods program. You know, Wells Fargo recognized this most recently, last month when they announced a $10 million grant to the NALCAB network to seed as equity the largest business loan fund that we have seen in this country targeted to Latinos. And I look forward to communicating with everyone about that. You know, I'd love to say more about our future, but we've got a present to worry about, so I'd like to close by just saying a few words about the Community Reinvestment Act. Let's be clear, the Comptroller of the Currency has publicly articulated an approach to CRA reform that will gut the CRA. It will undermine the community development finance system. If Mr. Otting gets his way, our path to equity will be harder. We cannot have a single metric because the quality of an investment and who it serves matters. We cannot allow investments that do not serve LMI communities, no matter where those are. And we need to see some solution to getting dollars from banks anywhere in this country to serve LMI people in persistent poverty counties. We need to solve these things, and we cannot lower our standards because somebody has put something on the table as a fake negotiating position to push us in another direction, right? So we need to hold strong. And the Federal Reserve has shown us a viable, data-driven path forward on CRA reform. They've been studying it for 10 years. This didn't come out of nowhere, right? And this Trump administration needs to stop trying to influence our central bank, whether it's on CRA, whether it's on monetary policy, whether it's on anything else. Get your hands out the bank, right? We can't stand for it, and we may need to stand up on it. And so we have our work cut out for us, you know? So get out there and vote, organize, invest in ways that our communities can see the good that you do. Thank you.
I told you we'd have a fight ahead, so. All right, next up is Robin Danner. Robin is a native Hawaiian from the island of Kauai, and you heard me refer to Robin's inspiration in my speech. She's the founding president and CEO of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. She's also the vice chairman of the State Council of Hawaiian Homestead Associations and a director on the board of Intertribal Economic Alliance. Robin has a fascinating background. She was raised on the Navajo, Hopi, and Apache reservations of Arizona and lived for 25 years among the Inupiat and Eskimo of Alaska. So, Robin, you got it covered. My story about Robin, which I spoke about, and her humbleness in explaining America's unfinished work, and her passion for our field, is really what inspired me to ask Robin to be here today. And I hope, Robin, you will just feel the welcome, some of the welcome that you gave me in Hawaii, and I'd ask you to welcome Robin.
Aloha. I didn't bring prepared remarks, I brought tissue. Lisa, you're incredible. I mean, this whole week has been amazing, overwhelming. Before I share about myself, I'd like to ask all of the native CDFIs, would you stand up for me? Stand up. Represent our people. In Indian country, we know that if one of us screws up, we've screwed it up for all of us. My name is Robin Puanani Danner. I was born on the island of Kauai, and as Lisa said, I was raised on the White Mountain Apache, Navajo, and Hopi Indian reservations, and then my parents took us north above the Arctic Circle for 25 years among the Inupiaq, or the Inuit people, and about 20 years ago, my mother asked me to return home to Kauai, and so I've been home on my native allotment for the last 20 years. When I got home, after spending a career in banking, and I was a tribal housing authority executive director for other native peoples, and my mom asked me to come home and to, I remember her words, do for Native Hawaiians to catch up with American Indians and Alaska Natives in our homelands. And that was just code for her to tell me, you're not allowed to go back into banking and be a capitalist. But my mom is Kawahine Kilomana Kolo. I have to say her name to be with us in this room because she would be shocked that I'm standing here before you. And my father's name is John William Danner from a little town in Milford, Nebraska. So I stand here before you as the product of a hot-blooded Native Hawaiian from Kauai and an Amishman from Nebraska. When you talked about, Noel, about faith, when you're raised by an Amishman, you have a very high pain threshold, very high. He told me when I was 12 that the Creator, we were on the Navajo Indian Reservation, he said, the Creator gives all of us gifts. Every single one of you has a gift the Creator gave to you. And my Amish father, who was obviously excommunicated, we became Lutherans. He said he needed a more moderate religion. But he said to me, I'm 12. God gives us all different gifts and talents, Robin. And I'm going to say this to all of you. And to not use those gifts and talent to serve others is a sin. That's what he told me. So I wore that burden till I was about 32, and then I said, Dad, dude, it's a curse. I don't want to know anything. I don't want any more talents. I mean, this is just too hard. When I got home, I learned so much from Alaska Natives and American Indians, and you have to think about it. American Indians have had the longest contact, 500 years. Then Alaska Natives, 1748, with the landing of a guy by the name of Vitus Bering. And of course, the Russians thought they owned the whole state of Alaska. Now they think they own all 50 states, apparently. But, and then Native Hawaiians, are roughly 40 to 50 years behind Alaska Natives because there was a federal policy actually called the Manifest Destiny Policy, which our democracy felt that in order to build a successful country, and it was correct from a banker's point of view, I'm a former banker, it was the land for free business model that went from the eastern seaboard across to the west, up to Alaska, and it eventually got out to Hawaii. So American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians have indeed built a great country on our backs and off of the taking of land. We are still perhaps, we are so patriotic. We are a resilient people, and we are able to balance the horrors that happened to our people over 200, 250 years. We're able to balance that knowing that we are part of and we have a voice and we have a vote in perhaps the greatest democracy the world has ever seen. We know this. And I think that what Lisa did for me, and I said this to her, when she first asked me to do this, I said, who are you? Who are you? That she would, and for us, and I know the Native CDFIs in the room will understand this, that she would see us, she would see me. Because mostly we're in your industry, we're in our industry as invisible bystanders. We kind of watch the big policy conversations, the big discussions. But our challenges are unique with the trust lands. For example, we have to live 2 decades with some consultant running around the country saying, you can't get mortgages on reservations. Our people have to live with that falsehood. And so we need to get together. We need to see one another. I know I see you. And I am so proud to be at OFN and for Lisa to see us as Native people, because we are gonna blow up the economic opportunities for everyone, I promise you that. What am I doing now? I founded CNHA, the largest coalition of Native Hawaiian organizations, but now I'm laser focused. I'm now the Shaw chairman of 41 homestead associations that are on my trust lands, on our trust lands. I'm also blessed by Indian country that I'm the national policy chair for the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian Native CDFI network. So I am laser focused now. With all those gifts I tried to deny, I am laser focused on the economies on trust lands, on Indian reservations, on Alaska ANCSA lands, and on Native Hawaiian homelands. I didn't know why I had to freeze my rear end off before coming home, but now I know, all three different groups. So what my closing remarks to you is that when I look out at this audience, I don't know if they put the photo up. The photo of the ocean on the right. When I see this audience, I see a sea full of oxygen tanks. That is beautiful, beautiful, the Pacific Ocean. Access to capital has become too convenient a term. I don't even ever want to hear it again. It's so nice. It's so colonized. Access to capital, we're under that water. We're choking, not having the oxygen. And when I look at this room, you're like a huge oxygen tank. You're like a huge blood bank. There is no community. I don't care if it's ethnic, cultural, I don't care geographically. There is no community that can survive without capital, without the bloodline of capital flowing through it. So I want to say to you, there's a huge swaths of our country that need us, They need you. They need access to capital. They need to bring the bankers, but they need the CDFIs to lead the way, to bring oxygen to all of the communities that have waited, and we have waited centuries. And I believe in you. I believe that we don't need anyone to come save us. That's what it took us as Native people 500 years to learn. No one is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves with partners. That's a different term than we will take care of you, we will do for you. No, we will do this together, and I am completely, especially from this week, Lisa, I am convinced that we already have the solution. In this room, we need not beg, we need not seek outside of the talent that Keakua and the Creator already gave us. And as my father said, I believe in our industry. We are not done. We need to get our rear ends moving and start pumping oxygen in every corner of the United States of America. Mahalo.
Thank you, Robin. Deep breath. We're going to keep that oxygen flowing. All right. Whew. All right. Now, Martin Eakes. Martin, thank you for being here. Martin is the Chief Executive Officer of Self-Help and the Center for Responsible Lending. Martin co-founded Self-Help, a community development lender, in 1980, and as legend has it, with a $77 proceeds from a bake sale. I think that's right. Martin chose the credit union path to anchor this, and it's now one of the largest, the largest community development credit union in the country that has provided over $7 billion in financing to more than 85,000 home buyers. Self-Help has 50 branch offices in North Carolina and California and Illinois, Florida, South Carolina, Virginia, and Wisconsin. Martin also helped establish in 2002 an affiliate of Self-Help, the Center for Responsible Lending, which battles predatory mortgage and payday lenders across the country. Martin has received so many awards. I was with him just recently when he received the Hubert Humphrey Award from the Leadership Conference. He's received the MacArthur Genius Award, the Ford Foundation's Visionary Award, the Credit Union's Wagner Award. But he says his favorite award is that he was designated the greatest enemy in the world to the 450% interest rate payday lenders. So we love that. So my personal story about Martin is that I met him in 1989, 30 years ago, when I joined the Ford Foundation. My predecessor had just quit the Ford Foundation to go work for Martin, and so I knew this must have been a pretty good place. But I went with Martin on a trip to go see what it was like to defend African-American-led credit unions in North Carolina. This was part of the Deep South. I think at the time I had never, as an African-American woman who grew up in Oregon, I had never been south of the Mason-Dixon. And I went with Martin, and I witnessed something very few of us get to witness. This was 30 years ago. And the regulators were a tough crowd. And they were white men, and they were in front of an African-American credit union board. And it was going to be a tough sell about whether they felt the credit union should go forward. And I saw Martin as the fighter and the lawyer and the person who understood that the rules that keep credit unions healthy could work for these small African Americans too. And I saw him unravel the arguments very deftly of the regulators. And I just saw someone use his privilege, a Yale law degree, somebody who's white, who grew up in the South, and use it for the benefit of people who did not have that. And that's so hallmark to me of our field and of Martin. So this is somebody I just deeply respect, and he has not spoken in front of OFN since I think we gave him the Gramlich Award, 15 years ago. So I appreciate, Martin, you coming back, and I just ask that you all welcome to the stage Martin Eakes.
Well, if I had known she was going to read off all these awards and make it a eulogy, I'd have done the decent thing and died before I got here. I feel like it's really a great honor to be on the same stage with Noel, who I've gotten to know, who's on my board, and Robin and Lisa, who are really fearless leaders for economic justice. It's even greater honor for me to be among my friends and fellow travelers. I've mentioned Bill Bynum and Cliff Rosenthal and Lisa Mensah, Michael Swack. There's so many people here that have lifted me up and given me strength when I needed it. I appreciate it. It's also really a great pleasure to be the last speaker. I can be completely outrageous, and there's no chance for any organized debate or rebuttal. And Lisa told me, you can speak a little bit longer, and I think it was because she knew that I think slowly and speak slowly, and it might take me a little bit longer to get through it. Since Bill Clinton spoke on Monday, and do we have the picture up? Yeah. And since this is the 25th anniversary of the CDFI Fund, I wanted to share a couple of funny stories, I think they're funny, about the Rose Garden event 25 years ago to launch the introduction of the bill to create the CDFI Fund. I and Self-Help were invited to bring 6 borrowers, which we took in a big white van to the Rose Garden event. The picture behind, if it has it with Tim Bazemore on the stage, I can't tell whether it is or not. It was so funny. This guy, yeah, there he is. Look behind him. There's Bill Clinton with his arms folded, and Lloyd Benson, and Tim Bazemore, who you could not really understand as he spoke because he hadn't finished high school, but he ran the workers-owned sewing company in the Black Belt of northeastern North Carolina. And I will tell you, even though Bill Clinton is a generational talent, a once-in-a-generation talent, the smartest man on that stage was Tim Bazemore. Now, I remember speaking out in that gathering and thinking that this was going to be funny. President Clinton used to claim that he had created 500,000 new jobs just about every month. Anybody remember that? And I jokingly stated that Self-Help's borrowers who were there appreciated that accomplishment more than just about anybody because each one of them had 3 or 4 of those jobs. I thought it was funny, but somehow Bill Clinton, not so much. Finally, one of my borrowers was the owner of a street-side fruit stand in Greensboro, North Carolina. She happened to be the very first SBA micro business loan made in the United States. In addition to being a really fabulous businesswoman, this borrower was also an uncommonly beautiful woman. So as we went through the receiving line in order to shake hands with President Clinton, he took my borrower's hand in a perfectly appropriate manner, but he wouldn't let go. He kept holding on to her hand, and finally he turned to the woman's husband, who was a truck driver and a good old boy from North Carolina, and this is what he said. He says, "Son, you have married above your station." And since I was standing right behind her, I am quite certain that Bill Clinton does not remember ever seeing me on that particular day. Now, I'd like to share a couple of thoughts over the last few years. A lot of years, and then I'll just jump right in. The first thought that I want to say is that community development lending is not primarily about lending. At Self-Help, we have 2 tithing principles. The first one we call tithing to the movement, and the second is called Tithing to the Future. So let's take Tithing to the Movement first. We don't measure it that well, but our aspiration is to take 10% of the grant-funded staff time that we have at Self-Help and devote it to the movement, to allies and other organizations that we work with, regardless of whether it has any benefit for self-help whatsoever. I spend 40 to 50% of my total time working with ally and partner organizations that are not directly connected to self-help. Our theory is that if we grow a single CDFI and it gets really strong, one big oak tree in a big field, it'll never be able to withstand a hurricane, whereas a whole forest of allies and movement partners can withstand just about anything. Some of you know and have heard the story that I grew up in an all-black community on the south side of Greensboro. When I was a youngster, maybe about 11 years old, I know some of you that's hard to even imagine at this point, I would take my worldly earnings of about $1 to a small neighborhood store, and I mean really small neighborhood store. This store was a concrete block about 20 feet by 15 feet. And the owner of the store, Ms. Laura, would give me a stool so I could sit on the counter. I'm 11 years old, and place my pennies in a little gumball machine. And I'd get out a little gumball, but I was really a gambler even then. They had a speckled ball. Anyone remember a speckled ball in a gumball machine? And if I got the speckled ball, I could trade it in for a quarter. So I'm like, I gotta get those quarters. I gotta keep on playing it in. And I'd spend hours every week with Miss Laura. And I thought she was ancient. She must have been at least 60 years old back then. And whenever I would get the speckled ball out of the gum machine, Ms. Laura would genuinely get excited for me and loved giving me the quarter in exchange for that little speckled ball. And one time I asked her, I said, why would, and sometimes when I'd run out of pennies, she'd give me extra pennies out of the cash register so that I could put them back into the gumball machine. And when she had loaned me money and I put it in and I won the quarter, I asked her, I said, why would you give me money so that it would cost you even more money? And Ms. Laura paused and she looked at me in silence for what seemed like a very long time. And then she finally said, son, there are many things in life more important than money. You are going to do great things. You're going to do great things one day. I still remember that. The first lesson of leadership is that you must pick people you trust to be change agents, and then you have to invest in them. Sometimes it's money, but more importantly, your faith, your love, and your belief in them. People will go to extraordinary lengths to live up to the confidence that another person has placed in them. The purpose of our lending is to create leaders, to build a movement, to build confidence in the people we work with. So if we get into the habit of saying no in a way that is smart and sassy, and we're better than you, we have failed as a community development lender. Number 2, every CDFI that's worth a damn should become an advocacy endowment for social change. An advocacy endowment for social change. So this is my second tithing principle. Tithing to the future means taking 10% of your revenues and putting them into reserves or into net assets that you provide for the future. And when it's sitting there, when I used to go to the Ford Foundation, they said, we're never going to give you an endowment grant. I said, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to create a hidden endowment without you knowing it. And we're going to put it there, and we're going to build it up, and it's going to help us pay for the work that we need to do. And so here is my true core belief, is that it is our duty and our privilege to fight for freedom and justice. It's a duty. We have to do it. And yes, I've learned from my faith raising that kindness and reason are not enough. While it's true that we should love our enemies, sometimes we have to stop the bastards first. I consider myself a really lucky person. Yes, I've had death threats from the Klan. I've had death threats from drug dealers in neighborhoods that we were working to rebuild. I've had large companies and leading legislators promise that they would destroy me personally. But I have incredible friends, an amazing family, and the privilege of working with literally thousands of families who are struggling against the odds to survive and make a better life for their children. So when the 450% interest rate payday lenders told me that they considered me and the Center for Responsible Lending their most formidable enemies, they actually said, in the universe, and that they had put up $10 million not to defeat us but to destroy me personally, I had this kind of bad feeling. Not about the threat, but because my mother had taught me when I was young that pride is the truly deadly sin, and I've got to confess, I was feeling like, I can live with you hating me. That actually has some pride. My mother also used to say that it's easy to be liked by everyone. All that is necessary is for a person to see nothing, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. The whole world will love you, but it's a price to pay that is way too steep. It's a fact that in this society, and maybe it's true worldwide, that there are powerful interests that want to keep the status quo exactly the way it is. Our job in this room is to blow it up and make sure economic justice is really the lifeblood of civil and human rights, but justice will never, ever be achieved without a fight. It always, always takes a fight. So I've come to appreciate two quotes from the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass. One you've heard of and is famous, and the other one a little less so. The first one that you've heard of is, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning." Frederick Douglass's second quote that I wanted to read is, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Now, this is a challenge of our time, whether it's in the villages of Iraq and Syria or in the inner cities of LA, Chicago, or Baltimore. If we turn our backs on young men and women aged 14 to 30 and leave them to languish in poverty and unemployment, if we leave them without purpose, without economic means to provide for a family and for children, the result will be inevitable, and it will not be pretty for them or for those nearby. Those abandoned will find affiliation and purpose in a gang or in an armed group. Violence and destruction take root when we fail to build young men and women with hope and purpose. Self-help's founding belief is that it's better to build strong families and communities from the beginning. We may commit to fixing neighborhoods after the fact, but if we do, and fix neighborhoods after they have already been broken by poverty and despair, but if that's what we're doing, it's an indictment of a great and wealthy country and proof that the vision of social justice has not yet arrived. I believe that building family wealth for working families and families of color is the only way to really build healthy communities, and that home ownership for many of those families is the primary way to build family wealth. As CDFIs, we have to be strong enough, the same preaching that we do to our communities, we've got to be financially strong enough and independent enough to fight for our communities, even if we have to battle against our friends and families and funders. It's easy to fight against an enemy. It takes real conviction and independence to be able to lovingly confront our friends and our allies. Let me close with the stories about why I do this work. I think probably everyone in this audience has heard all these stories, but for the one or two of you who've not heard it, here goes. My apologies to the rest. I told you I grew up in an all-black community. I didn't tell you that my father was a raging Jesse Helms right-wing Republican who moved to a community because he wanted his 4 sons to learn how to work on a farm like he did growing up. And he did make us all workaholics, but I swore I would never live on a farm. It's too much damn work. It's just too hard. My mother was this saintly woman who said, I only have one political goal. I find out a month in advance how your father will vote, and I vote the opposite in every election. So if I seem confused to you, I come by it genetically. So there were 2 events that really shaped me, and it really shapes all of self-help. The first was that I played Little League football on a church football team. Now you look at my massive build, and you just can see a huge football player power right here in the making, right? So half of my church football team was white. Half of my church football team was black. I was 11 years old. And my best friend and I decided we were going to join the church together. This was a Baptist church in downtown Greensboro. And we went into the minister, and the minister said, gave us an orientation for an hour. He says, Martin, I'm really so happy you're going to join. You know, I know your parents. This is going to be a wonderful church for you, a great community. And after the end of the hour, he turned to my friend and he says, I really hate to tell you this, but I'm sorry, you are not able to join this church because of the color of your skin. My friend, this little 11-year-old child, he had tears welled up and they streaked down his cheeks. And he looked up at the minister and he said, I'm just a kid. I don't understand. And I've never forgotten it. I never will. The second incident also involved one of my friends from my neighborhood, this time in high school. Greensboro was the very first city in the South to announce that it would comply with the Brown versus Board of Education decision handed down by the Supreme Court in 1954. It happened to be one of the last cities to actually desegregate. So even though I was 0 when Brown versus Board of Education was decided, I was 15 years old when the school started to desegregate. My best friend in the second year of desegregation, where we had race riots every morning in the lockers, it was not easy. We had 10% black students from all across the county coming to what had previously been an all-white high school. And my friend comes to me, his name was John Rogers. This was the most charismatic person I had ever met. He walked on the balls of his feet. When he spoke, you'd get tingles up your spine. And I used to joke with him. I said, someday you're going to be the first black president of the United States. But, I was kidding. We couldn't imagine a President Obama, not at that time in our life experience. So in this year, John comes to me and he says, Martin, you've been president of your class every year. You've been valedictorian of every school that you've been part of. He says, I want to be vice president of the student government. And I don't think I can win unless you agree to run with me as a ticket. And I looked at him, I said, I'm pretty good at math. 10% black student, that doesn't sound like a very smart thing for me to do. And I went home that night and I thought about it and I said, I don't really want to run for office anyway, so what do I care if we lose? And how hard it must have been for him to ask me to be his ally. So I went back the next day and I said, I've changed my mind, but I think we should run together and run as a ticket. And we ran and we won. I'm convinced we won because of him, not because of me. But he never did become president. He was a year younger than me. I went off to college. He was tutoring young kids, 9-year-olds, on how to rebound basketballs on an asphalt playground behind my house. And while he was doing it, this kid from across town that no one really knew dropped a little toy gun, looked like a toy gun, a Derringer, that fell out onto the pavement. And my friend went to him and said, what are you thinking? This is ridiculous. You can't bring a gun around these kids. Someone could really get hurt. And this guy went back to his car, put 2 bullets in the Derringer, never said a word, came back to the basketball court and shot my friend in the neck twice. And he died on the court behind my house. My pledge after he died was that I would spend the rest of my life trying to live for the two of us, not just for the one of me. And when things get tough and I get death threats, I say, I can't quit because my friend was tougher than me. He would never quit. And so much of self-help's work is actually a tribute to the children of my youth. And that's why we do what we do. That's why I'm such a pain in the ass. Okay, now I really am closing now. Despite this temporary period of public criminality and outright insanity, make no mistake, economic freedom and civil rights are on the march throughout the world. We're going to win. Women are risking their lives and bodies in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, to step forward to protest oppression in public. In this country, immigrants who toil in the sun to build a home for others will, with immigration reform, which is inevitable, have an opportunity to own a modest and safe home of their own. Those who are asked to serve the sick and bedridden in hospitals across the land will be able to get medical care for themselves and their loved ones. And my 7-year-old granddaughter, I feel confident will grow up to be able to choose who she wants to love, regardless of race, color, or sexual orientation, without fear of legal condemnation or discrimination. We're going to win. Struggle is the defining characteristic of life. Social justice makes the struggle worthwhile. I look forward to making this journey with you, the people in this room. We will not be defeated and we will not be deterred, and that's what we have as a community here together. Thank you for all that you do. We're going to win this, and this temporary period will be just a distant bad memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin Eakes. Well, all three of you, please join me so that this audience can thank my wonderful closing panel for the fight ahead.